Hey everybody, it's Kory, and the answer is no. No, I do not see a housing market crash coming in 2021. Nor do I see a housing market crash coming anytime soon, if at all. I am not on that bandwagon, and I will back up my position using facts and stats. Let's get into it. Do I believe there's a housing crash coming? No. And here's why. So I went to the graphics department and I had these cool graphics made up for you guys. Here is a balanced market. A balanced market in real estate is just like any other balanced market in economics. Price is dependent upon supply and demand. When you have more supply than you have demand, prices go down. When you have more demand than you have supply, prices go up. Guess where we're at right now? We are in a North Idaho housing market that doesn't just see high demand, it's way up there. And if this were a rubber band, it's stretching further and further apart right now. So our market sees extreme high demand and extreme low supply, record amount of demand and a record low supply right now. In fact, our market right now has a little under 2 weeks left of inventory. And a healthy market has 6 months or more. And you're not going to find a market in the country that has less inventory than North Idaho. It is really low. All right, so that's where we're at. Now, in order to go to a housing bubble collapse, you have to have the opposite happen. You have to have more supply, more homes on the market than you have buyers, and that causes the prices to go down or crash. We're not there. We're here. And before, pardon my graphics flying around, before we can go to a crash, right? We're going to have a balanced market first. And then you would have this housing collapse like we had in 2006. But please understand, the housing market is not like the stock market. So back in March, when this started happening, we woke up to see our 401ks lose 30% overnight. And the housing market is not like that. It takes time for the housing market because you have contracts that go into effect. And long story short, the housing market is more like molasses in how it moves compared to the stock market, which moves like hot coffee. It just moves. So a lot of people, when they talk about a housing collapse, they envision waking up the next day and losing 32% on their home. It doesn't happen that way. And I'm going to show you. So let's get into the stats and facts right now. Okay, so here we have the last 20 years of the North Idaho housing market. And you can see up here, this is the year 2020, down here is the year 2000. At the top, you can see we have the year, we have the number of active homes, or the percentage of active homes year over year. So for example, 2020 had 10% less homes than 2019. And then over here you have the sold homes. This is an indicator of your demand. You can see in 2020 we had 12% more homes sell, even though we had 10% less homes to sell. So that is an indicator of a very strong seller's market. And then over here you can see the price increase percentage-wise. So the year 2020 had an 18% increase over the year 2019. And this is the 20 years of the North Idaho market. And this is where we want to look for any kind of patterns that would indicate are we heading into another housing recession? And the way this is usually talked about is people look at this inflationary period on our prices. So the last 5 years here in North Idaho, we've seen price inflation. That's where we get this term bubble, right? You've got inflation going on. And our prices have inflated. They went up 9%. And then 12% the next year, 12% over that the next year, 10%, and you get the idea. And people look at this inflationary 5-year period and they say, well, that looks real similar to what we had down here, the 5 years before the housing market crash of 2006. You had these 5 years of inflation, and then you have the 5 years of downturn. That was the Great Recession. So they look at the inflationary period that we're in now and the inflation period that we were in then, and they say, well, it stands to reason that we're heading into another bubble burst. And notice that you had 5 straight years of downturn, and that was the only 5 years out of 20 that we had prices go down here in North Idaho. So the Great Recession in the country did impact North Idaho. But that's where I draw the line as far as comparisons between the two periods. And let me explain. If you come down here, so over here on sold homes, you notice there's a real consistent, strong buyer sentiment. Buyers are always wanting to buy here in North Idaho, but they went crazy on these 3 years right here. Nowhere else in this 20 years do you see 30%, 33%, and there was this real strong period where demand was super high. We sold a lot of homes. Well, why was that? It was due to a lax lending standard period. So in other words, the banks were giving away adjustable rate mortgages. Remember those? We don't see those anymore. Remember the interest-only mortgages? We don't see those anymore. Banks were giving loans to people that didn't have to justify their income. They didn't have to show 2 years of work history, and they didn't have to have a down payment. And that was what caused a lot of people to get excited about buying second homes and start speculating on the real estate market. And they were motivated to do so because if you remember in 2000, we had the dot-com bubble burst in the stock market. People were still shell-shocked from that. They're going, where do I put my money? I don't want to lose my money overnight like I did in the market. Let me invest in real estate. In 2001, you also saw 9/11, and you had the uncertainty of that. And then you had all those sexy shows on home improvement and flipping, and all that stuff started to hit the market. You had cheap money, easy loans, and people started speculating on the housing market, not just here in North Idaho, but all over the country. So that's what you had here. Do we see any of that in this period up here? So again, coming back down, sorry, you had 33, 30, and 15, very strong buyer sentiment demand. We had strong buyer sentiment up here, but nothing like this 30 and 33%. Well, what happened? These people that bought these homes because they didn't have skin in the game, they didn't have, their 20% down, they had adjustable rate mortgages. As the interest rates went up, their monthly payments went up, and the property prices were dropping. And as the prices dropped, they saw their monthly mortgages go up. They become upside down on their houses. And as they became upside down, they put their houses back on the market. And nowhere, you guys, on active homes do you see this double-digit plus surplus of homes hitting the market. Look, in this 20 years, this was the only period where you saw double-digit plus side active homes hitting the market. And I argue that this bomb right here that we called the Great Recession, here's my cute little fuse, right? It burst, but what was the fuse? It was this right here. And I argue that before you can ever have prices drop, you have to have supply hit the market. And this is what happened. You had this over surplus of houses hitting the market, and look what happened over here. Prices started to drop. Do we see this same fuse going into the next phase? No, we do not. Look at this. We have to go right down here. That's 6 straight years where new homes were not hitting the market. Active homes simply have not come on the market. And the inventory has been eaten away over the last 6 years by this. Look at this. You have this strong demand for people wanting to come to North Idaho. And this strong demand, look at the homes that are being sold are year over year going up, even though the inventory is going down. So we've actually eaten into the inventory to where there's almost no inventory left. In fact, right now, in January 21, there's less than half a month inventory in the North Idaho housing market, and a healthy market is 6 months. Nowhere in the country is it lower than that. This is an extremely competitive market right now. So again, in review, you have active homes here going down, and here, prior to the Great Recession, you had a surplus of homes on the market. Two totally different things. and it takes a while for the housing market to see the equity loss, right? So if you add these 5 years up, we lost 32% equity total. And when you hear people talk about a housing collapse, it's almost as if the stock market is going to collapse. They think that next year in 2021, house prices are going to drop 32% and therefore I can afford a house. It doesn't work that way. Look, in the Great Recession, in 2007, the houses only dropped 3% over the year prior. And then the following year, it only dropped 5% compared to the other year, and so forth. In fact, 13% was the lowest that we saw in the 5-year period. Now let's put the things in perspective. We lost 32% in these 5 years, but down here, these homeowners gained 69% going into the Great Recession. And if I were to tell you that out of 10 years in the stock market, you were going to go and gain 70% the first 5 years, but then you were going to lose 32% for a net gain of 37%, you would have said, I'll take that bet. And that's what has happened. So even though we see prices drop during the Great Recession, these homeowners, if they had owned their home, they still came out ahead. And people say, well, Kory, that's a great theory, but I don't want to be the poor guy that buys up here at the top of the market and then goes into a recession. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to buy. I'm going to rent and wait out the market. I'm going to rent for 1 to 5 years, and I'm going to avoid this hit. So let's look at that scenario. So in this chart, I show you 2007 to 2011. Those were the 5 years of the Great Recession. You can see down here we lost a total of 32% equity in a home during that 5-year period. You can see here going into the Great Recession, the median price on a home was $208,000. Yes, here in North Idaho, that's what it was in 2007. And by it going down 3% the first year, you saw your equity go down to 2002, and it went down 5,558,000. And you can kind of see the progression. In the end, your $208,000 home fell all the way to $150,000. So that is a $58,000 loss in equity on the home. So this does not include, by the way, if you own the home, the write-off of the interest each year. So this number would have been less than $58,000 when you factor in the tax incentives of owning a home. But let's just keep it simple. In that 5 years, if you waited, you would have saw a $208,000 home go down to $150,000. Congratulations, you would have avoided losing $58,000 on that home. However, what do you do in the meantime? You have to rent, right? So back then, the rent for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home was $1,200 a month. And if you did that for 12 months, you were spending $14,400 a year on rent. And you can see most of these years here, up here, you would have been a fool to rent for $1,440 to save $5,000. Cumulatively, over the 5 years, if you had rented, you would have given $72,000 to your landlord, paying his or her mortgage down at the expense of $72,000 to save $58,000 on the market. Congratulations, you lost $14,000 under that scenario. So you really have to think twice about, am I going to rent and wait the market out? And not knowing, like you do here, foresight, or is it foresight? Looking back, it's easy to see it was a 5-year period, but when do you jump back into the housing market? You don't know. It's a calculated risk to wait for the market to fall, is the point here. And you say, well, I just won't rent. I'm going to live in my mom's basement for 5 years. And that way I can save $58,000. Look, I love my mom, I love my mother-in-law, but there's no way I'm going to live in their basement to save $58,000 over 5 years. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's bring it down into even more simple terms. The difference between the last housing recession and the one everybody's predicting is the market and the buyer. So let's talk about the market. North Idaho does not have the land left to develop to support the demand. The supply cannot meet the demand because we don't have a lot of land left to build on. Let's take a look at it. So here we have, this is a really cool app, by the way, you guys. It's the Idaho Hunt Planner through Fish and Game for Idaho. And you can see I have the 5 counties of North Idaho right here. And that's your panhandle, the 5 counties. And we're talking about supply. And North Idaho does not have the land mass in which to develop homes. So developers just don't have the land to go gobble up and start putting homes on. And I've touched on this in other videos. You can check out my landmass video on YouTube. I talk a little bit more about this in detail. But I just want, for the sakes of this video, to show you guys how limited our land is and why you're not going to see a massive supply come hit the market. So you have your satellite image here. Let's go ahead and click on State and Federal Land Management and watch how much of our land mass is actually owned by the state and feds. So notice that you have these stretches of private land, and this is about 40% of your land mass that you're able to build privately. 40%. That means 60% of your land mass is unbuildable because it's owned by the feds or the state. Now, of this private land, it's kind of deceptive because about 40% of that private land is owned by timber companies, Stimson Lumber and Inland Paper, and by mining companies. So for example, down here in the Silver Valley, you see all this private land. Most of that land is owned by the mining companies. That's where our mines are. And then over here on you got the valley floor of Kootenai and Bonner. A lot of this land up here is owned by the Inland Paper and Stimson Lumber. So when it all boils down, there's about 15% of this land mass in which we can actually build homes on. There's not a lot of land left for developers to build out. So when we talk about a supply of homes, not even the builders can keep up with the demand by building homes. It's really tight. Okay, and then let's talk about the buyers. Buyers in this market are a lot different than buyers from the market leading up to the last recession. Remember, the last recession had buyers that were funded with adjustable rate mortgages, interest-only loans, no money down, didn't have to justify their work history. That buyer was different than the buyer now. The lending standards have changed. In fact, you cannot get a conventional loan unless you put 20% down and you have a 700 credit score. Buyers are different right now. The buyers that are winning these homes have skin in the game. They are not walking away from these homes in the next economic downturn, which means you're not going to have that supply that we talked about as a fuse for the market to go boom. So there you have it, guys. A little bit of stats and facts. We kind of geeked out on you. I want you to have a different perspective than you're hearing on the internet and on the TV about all this market crash nonsense, especially when it comes to North Idaho. I think it's nonsense. And I can tell you that from the stats and facts that we saw. And I can also tell you from my personal perspective, being on the ground, in the game, seeing the demand and why people are coming here. And I can tell you that the demand for people to come here since the election has picked up. People they don't like the uncertainty in the country right now. In fact, I kind of compare it this way. When you see gun sales go down, you'll see the demand for North Idaho go down because they're the same buyers. People that buy guns buy it for the uncertainty in the environment. They want to feel safe, and that's why people are coming to North Idaho. They want to feel safe. They want to be in a more conservative area. So if you want an insider's opinion about when the market's going to crash, it's when people don't buy guns anymore. That's when you'll see the North Idaho market go down. Okay, so let's wrap this thing up. I want to be very clear. There is a difference between a collapse, which I'm predicting is not going to happen here in 2021 or anytime soon. There's a difference between a collapse and a moderation. And I do see our market moderating. Well, what is moderation? Well, you guys, 18% equity year over year is not a healthy market. That is not the kind of market that can sustain itself. We just simply cannot go up another year with 15 to 20% equity gain. That has to fix itself. That doesn't mean it's going to crash. It just means that the prices this year in 2021 are probably going to be somewhere around 10%. And I think that's where we're going to end up. Somewhere around that double digit, maybe 9, 10% in 2021. And then the following years, I see again, maybe a 5 to 10% equity increase, because we just simply can't have these leaps like we've had of equity increase. It has to slow down. So to be clear, I do see a slowing in those prices, but they're still going to go up. And they're going to go up to at some point to where we have just a healthy market increase, somewhere 3 to 5%. But we're a ways off from that, maybe a couple years away from that. All right. So thank you guys for sticking with me through this. I know I've done a lot of rambling, but hopefully we've addressed your question about whether this market is going to see a crash or not. Appreciate you following. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want more information about the North Idaho market. Bye now.